Hello and welcome to the second episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Ashley Early.
And I'm Casey Jones.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the tagline of our show, specifically since we've decided to dub ourselves the non-sales bro sales podcast. Figured it'd be a good idea to start by defining what a sales bro is. This is a term you're hearing on some sales floors, not others, but Casey and I actually have had some fun the past few days asking our friends and colleagues how they define a sales bro. And I'll be honest, Casey, the first couple people I asked actually turned it into a different term altogether. They thought I was asking about a language warning, sales douche.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a shorthand for a kind of douchey salesperson. And it's pretty funny. So Ashley and I talked about this when I first was telling someone on my team about our tagline. He's never been in sales and he's kind of new to the sort of tech and B2B space in general. And he immediately thought I just meant like a guy who is in sales. And he made this face like, oh, you're being so rude. Like you're being so sort of anti-male. And my colleague and I had to sort of sit him down and be like, no. Sales bro doesn't mean just like a guy in sales. It's a particular term. It references a particular type of person and is sort of an archetype or stereotype within the sales community.
I think that's a really good point here. Is what we're talking about today is this idea. It's a fictional person, although everyone who's listening to this probably knows someone who fits in the category. But this is a fictional stereotype. Yeah. So there are elements of this that I definitely, as we were compiling lists and stuff like that, I was like, ooh, I hit that. I definitely don't hit those. So it's kind of interesting. But I don't know about the people that you talked to, Casey, but most of the people that I asked tended to lean one way or the other in terms of when I asked them what they thought a sales bro was, they immediately started with either visual characteristics, like how they could literally see, dressed, stuff like that, or behavioral characteristics. Yep. So I think the visual ones were kind of the fun ones. So some of the things I got pretty much everyone who mentioned visual stuff brought up vests. Vests. They brought up Allbirds.
Yep.
They brought up typically guys, typically white, typically college grad.
Yep.
But very into sports.
Oh yeah. Probably played sports in college, maybe high school.
And a lot of them, I think, probably I would just to expand a bit, I think a bunch of them are probably on a rec team of some sort right now.
Yep.
Which they're very proud of. They're very competitive.
Yep.
They take that rec league very seriously. They were league champions last year. They beat out Twitter. It was very exciting.
Without a doubt. Or they're just competitive about pointless things, So like I've definitely worked on teams where they will this is not an exaggeration, where a group of the sales bros, and keep in mind, we'll talk about some of the more sort of toxic behavior of the sales bros, but there's also a lot of just like really wonderful, sort of good humored, great stuff that gets associated with this. And they would have eating contests in the office of like who could eat some crazy amount of food in the shortest time period. It all comes down to competition.
I'm laughing. I actually, early days as a manager, I had a couple SDRs who every time they got hung up on had to do 10 push-ups. And this is like a bet they had with each other and they went back and forth. I vividly remember, and if they're listening to this, they'll know I'm talking about them and they won't mind. Because they're both dads now and it's really funny. I still can't believe they're dads. But they also would drink their like pre-workout drink.
Oh, without a doubt.
Get like buzzy at their desks while like literally like bouncing at their desks while they're waiting to finish up their calls so they could go get their workout in and crush it.
Yeah. Oh,
crush it.
A lot of those terms. Lot of those terms.
Yeah, pound the phones.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very, very masculine, very sort of aggro, right? And I, I guess it was my first like phone sales job, very boiler room kind of environment. And they definitely had a bro sales culture where it was like, if we were having kind of a slow morning, they would pull everyone off the phones bring us out into the parking lot and make every salesperson chug a Red Bull at like 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, oh Lord.
Tell you what certain people on that team were doing in the bathroom in the afternoons, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are always interesting. On that same line, the beer o'clock.
Oh,
It's
yes.
very heavy with the sales bro.
Without doubt.
If it's 4 or 5 o'clock, there is some beer in their hands. Bonus points if it's craft and they know where it's from.
Oh yeah.
That's the millennial sales bro.
Yeah. Is it ever craft beer? Yeah. 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 And I think, there's a lot of these sort of just funny, silly things. But I think it's really the behavioral and kind of attitude stuff where things get a little more negative and where the impact can be more pervasive than just sort of, I don't know, laughing at how every guy on the sales team is wearing the same blue plaid shirt.
With the Patagonia vest.
With the Patagonia vest.
And the khakis and the Allbirds.
Although you realize too, Patagonia, and there were lots of jokes actually. This was more about VC firms, because I think there's actually some close alignment between the sales bro and the VC bro, Allbirds, vest, the whole nine. But Patagonia recently announced that they will not allow companies to use Patagonia vests for their swag, their branding, unless they are B corporations, which there are very few tech companies that are going to qualify for that. And there were a bunch of memes on Twitter kind of like making fun of all of the tech bros that were so devastated, the tragedy that they wouldn't have their branded Patagonia vests anymore.
I'll say this, that reminds me of one of my favorite cracks that one of my friends shot to me about a sales bro. He said a sales bro is a guy who thinks it's okay to wear a puffy vest on a first date.
That's good. I like that.
And that came from a guy too.
Yeah.
That made me very happy.
Yeah,
that was really good. But yeah, no, you're right. It's totally behavior. And I'll say this, that's actually a pretty good segue, because that's sort of, we both know like, oh, puffy vests, first date. I mean, puffy vests are, as someone who has owned several in the days, both in the 90s and today, like they have their place.
Oh,
they have a purpose.
Yeah.
A first date is not one of them.
Yeah.
And if you think that that's okay, in my mind, that shows a certain amount of self-centeredness and almost willful ignorance about what is okay and isn't okay when it comes to interactions. And that, I think, is that gets us into the behavioral aspects and almost for the personality aspects of the sales bro.
That's I would say the theme is the sort of self-absorbed personality, a little bit of narcissism. All of the responses that I got when they were really talking about behavior, and especially about the toxic kind of impact of this culture and of this sort of mindset, it all came down to sort of the selfishness. And one of the phrases that I really liked, shout out to Lucas Walker, who's on John Barrow's team. He said, a sales bro is someone who treats prospects like free tequila shots at an open bar wedding.
Oh, that's great.
I love that. And I think that's it. And it's like, that was the theme that I got over and over, was like, they're the ones that it's quantity over quality. That it doesn't matter what is right for the prospect or even for the company. It's what feeds their bottom line.
And it's more subtle than that even. It's what feeds their ego.
Absolutely.
Like shout out to Julian on the Vendition team. He talked about, he was at an event recently, and he talked about 2 interactions he had. He heard I was asking about sales bros, and he literally like blew up my phone to tell me these stories, which is just, I love Julian. And he had one guy approach him. He just knew immediately this guy was going to be a bro. When I asked him, well, how did you know? He's like, well, I have an energy. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about the interaction. The whole conversation was about himself.
Yep.
And even when he immediately overshared, but then even when he asked questions, it was solve my problem.
Yeah.
What do you do when you encounter this problem? How have you, here's why my way's better than yours.
Yeah.
Everything was directing it back at them. Julian said it took him 15 minutes to extract him from that conversation because this guy just would not shut up about himself.
Yeah. And I think that is the perfect example. And, when you gave me that example before, we talked about, I recently saw this really long thread on Twitter that this woman wrote about a date that she'd gone on where she'd sat there for like 90 minutes where the guy didn't ask her a single question. And so all these women were chiming in with these bad date experiences of guys, hours long dates where the guy never asks the woman anything about herself. And I think that's the sort of dating equivalent of the sales bro.
Totally. And I think, that makes a lot of sense given the way we know sales needs to be done today. Sales today is a conversation. It is a two-way street. It's an exchange of ideas, and it needs to be incredibly consultative.
Yep.
So the idea that I see this all the time when I'm doing trainings is if I ask the right question, if I tell them the right thing, it's not about you as a salesperson. Like I cringe every time I hear someone try and close a call with, well, what I think we need to do. Yeah. I don't care what you want. I'm the buyer. Tell me what I need, or, make it about what I want. Yeah. That self-absorption, that refusal to, that desire to control, which ends up actually, it controls something, but it controls people in the other direction. Without a doubt. And I think what's really interesting is some of the best salespeople that I've ever worked with, there's one I have in mind in particular that when you first meet him, you think he's a bit of a sales bro. Very good looking, played sports in college, pretty aggressive as a sales guy. But what made him so good is that he was phenomenal at qualifying out bad opportunities. So when he got a sense really early on that it just was not a good fit for that client, rather than trying to like shoehorn it in, he would end it, and he'd end it quickly. And I compare him to one of the worst salespeople that I knew, where he would try to force the situation. And I remember he wound up closing an absolutely massive, like 6-figure deal, big logo. And the company wound up having to devote a ton of resources to make product adjustments to close it. It took a ton of time. It took a ton of resources to get it done. And within the first quarter, this massive logo came back and was like, you guys aren't delivering on a single thing that you had promised. And they walked away and didn't pay a dime. And this is like, the company lost a ton of money for this. And it was all because he really, really wanted to chase that logo. And he really wanted to have that kind of, big, sexy notch on his belt. And the guy that was the one qualifying out, he didn't close 6-figure deals, but he closed a ridiculous amount, 7-figure deals is what I meant to say this whole time. He didn't close a lot of 7-figure, but he closed a ton of 6-figure deals, and he wound up like crushing his quota quarter after quarter. And that's the thing, like, it can be incredibly lucrative to actually give a damn what the other person needs. And that's the thing that I sort of feel like a lot of the responses that we got is that sales bros miss. No, I think that's totally true. And it's not just from a sales perspective, it's an interpersonal perspective as well. Selling is more than ever a team sport. From SDR to the AE to the sales engineers to the customer support team to marketing to operations. You've got 7, 8, 10, 15 people who've got their hands in deals. If you can't play nice and make sure that when you call somebody, they're going to take your call and make it happen, you're on your own. Yeah. Honestly, one of the best salesmen I've ever worked with, probably is a sales bro in more ways than one, except for the fact that he took such good care of his people. Yeah. Like, even there were a few points where, like, there was very heavy emphasis on drinking and stuff like that. And I'd maybe like, hey, I'm not going to, okay, great, no problem. We moved over and started doing shots with the next person. no pressure. And it wasn't like a negative, oh, you're not doing it, I'm going to do it with someone else. It was just a, okay, no worries. Hey, so-and-so, you want tequila? Okay, great. You guys have fun. But he used to always say, never lose alone.
Yeah.
And that was such, and he really built an org around that believed in it. Like the number one question you got when there was a closed loss deal was, who else did you bring in?
Yeah.
And if the answer was no one, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
And the sales bros tend to be the ones who are the most reticent because they think they've got it, or they're scared to bring in other people because they don't want to be seen as weak. Something else that I heard a lot was the sales bros tend to be very smart. They're smart cookies a lot of the time, but they will downplay their intelligence to get you to validate it. And they probably do some sort of like self-protective behaviors to almost like screen out and keep the facade up. I'm crushing it. I'm killing. I'm closing everything. Everything's always awesome. I made this many dials today. I feel like we need like a crushing it sound effect. You're crushing it. But they always want to keep that facade up. So when they actually need help, they don't ask for it. And because they don't ask for it, they lose. And there's always someone else to blame. And they don't grow. They don't iterate. They just brute force through whatever.
And I think the other big thing there is they're not feeding that energy into their team or those around them. And so not only do they not grow, but the people around them don't either.
Well, they're held back.
They're held back. And I think that's one thing that's really pivotal here is sales bros tend to make the worst sales leaders.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the sort that knows how to really coach or how to mentor or how to cultivate great talent. And I think that's the other thing that, we both really discovered in these conversations or it got brought up in these conversations is that it's not just, being a sales bro is maybe not the best strategy as far as being a salesperson, but it can also be really toxic into the sort of culture around you because it doesn't lift people up. It doesn't encourage people. It doesn't kind of support other people. And so it tends to be this very self-serving thing that doesn't serve the organization and doesn't help you all kind of do well together.
100%. And we keep going and. We could go on about this forever for a while, but you hit something on the head there with the sales leaders. And this is something where I think it's worth noting. Sales is and will continue to change.
Yeah.
But it has changed significantly over the past, I'd say 20 years especially, but even in the past 10. I would say I've seen, I agree. I mean, I'd say, past 2 years, mainly with the whole Me Too movement and everything, but in the past 5 years with tech, it's changed a lot, and it's changed very quickly. And it's changed so quickly that the people and the sales leaders who have come of age in the past 20 years aren't in a lot of senior positions yet. Yeah. So not to say, I want to make a note here, like just to say what is and is not. Like we're not saying everyone over whatever is a sales rep. We're not at all. It's about calling out these behaviors and making sure that we as a community can have these tough conversations and figure out how to fix things. Yep. But there is definitely, I mean, I've written articles on this literally saying the biggest disservice we as a sales community have right now is media coverage. Because if you ask someone on the street what sales is, they're going to say Boiler Room, Glengarry Glen Ross, Wolf of Wall Street, Wall Street, greed is good.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be honest, I can recite the Glengarry Glen Ross speech.
Oh yeah.
I adore that movie because it is so painful to watch. I've only gone through it once.
Phenomenal movies. Phenomenal.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's painful as a salesperson to watch, but it's so important to watch because you watch these things and you realize that's what this industry has been.
Yeah.
It's been the sales bro. That was the be all and the end all and the epitome of the professional.
Yeah.
And it's not anymore. It's just not. And the media hasn't caught up to that at all. There are no portrayals that I can think of. Please, someone prove me wrong. That shows an actual modern real sales rep doing a relationship-based sale in the media. I don't see it.
I don't know that that's entertaining enough.
No.
I do love, and John Barrows talks about this quite a bit, and he has, because for the longest time, I was with you, I did not have a good example of a sales movie, like a movie that portrays sales in a wonderful way. And John has thought a lot about this, and he has two phenomenal examples.
Ooh.
I'm going to save my true favorite for second, because it has a near and dear sort of special place in my heart. But first is The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. I guess you're right.
He's super positive. He's got that grind, but he's doing it for the right reasons.
But when he's doing the grind, he's doing it not by manipulating, but by listening.
But by listening and by working harder and by learning. And I thought that was a great example. But my favorite is Tommy Boy.
Oh my God.
And as soon as he was like, that's my favorite sales movie, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I think of it as a sales movie? But it is. That's exactly what it is. And one of the things that I love about it, and this is something that Ashley and I have been having lots of conversations about, but we will continue to, and it's a big theme of this podcast, is that the real message in Tommy Boy is that you have to find your own style. Right? He tries to follow his dad's, and it just doesn't work. He just cannot nail that cow's ass metaphor that his dad would get so good.
Oh my gosh.
But once he is himself, his weird, ridiculous, absurd self, that's when he starts to really kill it. And I think that's the biggest thing about, the element about sales bro kind of pervasiveness and culture that we want to push back against, is that sales bro culture makes you think that you have to be a certain way to sell. And in our experience, the only way you have to be to really sell well is you have to be your own way. You have to find that method, that style that really works for both you and for the person you're talking to. So you've got to be malleable. You've got to be able to listen and adjust so that you're kind of delivering information, the right information, but in the right way for the right person at the right time. No challenge there.
No, absolutely. And that's really the definition, I think, if we want to come down to anything and summarize. It's a sales bro is someone who lacks the self-awareness and empathy to be what the buyer needs them to be to close the sale.
Boom. I think we just got a quotable quote. Yeah, that was it's not a mic drop, because then we wouldn't be able to continue to record this, but it was a really heavy pen drop. So
yeah, I literally fell off the table and onto my lap and on the floor.
But I think that's it right there. And it's that selfishness and that sort of self-absorbedness that makes it so that they can't adjust to deliver the kind of value that a prospect really, really needs.
Totally. And to be clear, I mean, even as we were talking through this and we're laughing, there's a lot about this that I do. I do some of these behaviors.
Yeah.
I have moments where I have tough time changing. I adore these sales movies. I'm hyper competitive. But when it comes down to it, I think one of my biggest strengths is empathy and is knowing what the other person needs at an instinctual level and cultivating that sense so I can, chameleon myself to be what they need and get what I need to get.
Yep.
So, and I think that's the one thing is like, and we're probably going to have people even on this program. I think we've already talked to a few of them that by most standards are probably sales bros, but they have one or two characteristics that, while they may have their moments, they are brilliant salespeople. So this isn't about us trying to say these people are bad and they're all horrible. This is, look, we want to have a conversation that talks about the way sales is and should be done today.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about how to not be this and how to be better at what you are.
And I think that is so spot on. And I think keep in mind that, yes, well, we're going to be talking a lot about how to be a really strong individual contributor. I know so many of you out there are also thinking about your future and you're thinking about how to be a good leader. And just like a lack of empathy is going to really leave you hamstrung when it comes to your ability to add value to a prospect or to a customer. It's going to be the exact same when it comes to leading a team. And so if
100%.
you put yourself in the shoes of, the team you have, but also the candidates that you want, you're going to really struggle to attract and retain the kind of talent that is going to make your team stand out. And so I think about this all the time, like, one of the best ways, if you're thinking about, we were talking the other day about spiffs, right? You're talking about benefits. You're talking about activities and rewards that inspire and motivate your team.
Oh, I've got thoughts on this.
If you are only thinking about yourself and the things that you want, you are not going to be able to put together kind of a package or an event or an experience that is going to make the people on your team excited to come to work every day and excited to hustle their little butts off.
And I'll say this too. I'm reminded of a Key and Peele sketch called The Black Republicans.
Oh.
And one thing they keep saying in this sketch is we are not a monocosm. And I think that's the other thing about that we really want to highlight in here is salespeople sell differently. Salespeople are different. And if you clone yourself, you will fail as a leader. If you assume that everyone is going to be motivated the same way, you will fail.
Oh yeah.
If you try and just clone your best performer, you will fail.
Yeah.
Because everyone sells different, everyone buys different, and you need those people who have all sorts of personality types and experiences and backgrounds and strengths and weaknesses. Diversity is what gives you strength.
Without doubt.
Not that, that monocosm of thought.
Well, and
the data is bearing that out again and again and again, by the way. Like, we'll link some examples to that and we'll keep bringing up. There's been several Harvard Business Review studies. There's been a couple by MIT. There's tons and tons of, and more data set talking about diversity, both in terms of sex, gender orientation, race, ethnicity, age. Literally, the more diverse, the more things you can get different on a team and get everyone performing, the better the system.
Well, especially because we all get better at empathizing when we are surrounded by diverse mindsets and diverse backgrounds. And, it's really funny when you're talking about, when it comes to like motivation and things like that, every sales team I've ever worked on, at some point I have to pull my boss aside and explain that I am competitive with myself. I am not competitive with my peers. And every sales team, I will have some boss that like wants to to inspire me. And so they'll try to pit me against someone on my team, where it'll be like, you two against each other. You guys are in 1 and 2 spots, like go after it. And it's like, nope, that makes my motivation go in the tank. I don't like that. I don't respond well to it. Other people do. I do not. And I always have to be like, no. You need to bring it back to me being a better version of me improving from my past performance, all of that kind of thing. And here's the deal. You don't learn those things from your team unless you ask a lot of questions. Just like you don't learn what your prospect needs and wants unless you ask a lot of questions. And not those like manipulative questions, but the actual curious ones where you have that sense of curiosity so that
you really listen to the answers. Listening is so underrated and so under-taught, I think. And it's something that we don't necessarily do naturally. Especially because, let's be honest, most salespeople tend to be extroverted and tend to be a little bit narcissistic.
Yeah.
So we like hearing ourselves talk.
Yep.
And you think back to early in your sales career, you think back to the calls you were making, you probably talk 90% of the time. And you're like, why am I failing? Because you're not letting the other person talk. You're not listening to what they're saying.
Yep.
Them talk 90% of the time, you'll close something.
Yeah. Oh, it's a numbers game. It's just odds, right?
Yep. Yeah. So and it's interesting how the sales bros will look at that data and think, oh, I just need to talk more. No. No. Please take your feet up off the desk. Stop throwing that ball to yourself. Maybe listen
Yeah.
for a minute. And to the prospect, to the people who are trying to help you, just check yourself.
Yeah. And so, I think hopefully now, and you probably, if you are listening to this, you probably already have heard that term and you probably already have a sense, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of added perspective in terms of how you want to be different. Because even though Ashley and I have our strong opinions on what makes a sales pro, just going to our friends and our colleagues in our communities and asking this question, there were a lot of really interesting things that came up and a lot of really good points that it spurred some thought around what kind of person, what kind of sales professional, I would like to be categorized as, and what that really means. And so hopefully this, conversation made you think through some of those things. And so we would certainly be very curious to A, hear any really good sales bro stories that you've got, but B, hear about if any of this was surprising or if any of it made you think a little differently about the kind of sales professional you are or you want to be.
And to that end, please do find us on social media, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I think you can tag your posts with #salesbro. I think we can make this a thing.
Yes.
Start going on there. I'll share one of my favorite stories on Twitter. It involves a sales bro in a banana costume.
Ooh.
I love this one.
That's
Casey,
good.
what are you going to share? What are you going to tell a story about on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever we're going to post these?
You know what? I've got a bunch of really good sales bro stories. So right before we kick this off, I shared with Ashley one of the most outrageous examples of sales bro culture where it was like a sales kickoff that I was at. And it was, 100 people in a room all engaging in a behavior that was a little appalling. But you know what else I'm going to do? Because I just really want the excuse. I am totally going to be sharing some Tommy Boy videos so that we can all get a little bit inspired by
all the Chris Farley.
Yeah, all Chris Farley of Tommy, convincing that waitress to turn on the fryer and get him some chicken wings.
I love it, and we have to include Alec Baldwin at some point just so we can look at my watch.
Without a doubt.
All of that too, just to enjoy it for what it is, which is pure sales silliness.
Absolutely. And we'll also include a bunch of this in the show notes. So definitely check it out and share some of your best stories and share some of the things that, I don't know, this got you thinking about. What kind of non-sales bro do you want to be?
Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. We'll be releasing our next episode soon, which is we're going to start our interviews. We've already recorded a couple. We're very excited to share those with you. We're also excited to start talking about some of our favorite topics that we want to dive into. We think our first series is actually going to be a couple shows on brand and reputation, and specifically how to manage those. So we're excited to start talking about those with you guys. Hit us up on all the social media. Look forward to hearing from you soon and see you next time.
Yes.